My name is Vikas, and I'm so thrilled to be here, to be honest. I've been lecturing around last whole week, but haven't seen a more pleasant atmosphere. Well, the last time I sat in the classroom as a small kid was a long time ago, and I'm feeling so nostalgic. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. Love you all. Okay. The subject of the talk is actually, you need to know that cell phones and iPads and laptops, all these devices, when they are connected to the internet, right? How do you actually get internet on your devices? How is it that when you say Google, something pops up and you write the keyword and it goes searching and there you are? Whatever you want, it's on fingertips, right? You guys are so lucky. It wasn't like that when I was a kid. Right, brother? So, in a sense, you guys are so lucky that information is on tips. So, what happens behind these devices? You see, what brings that information, what makes that information pop up so quickly is a signal, right? We call it a signal. You know that, right? Signal. Now, well, we call it signal, and that's where usually the story ends for most of us. But my interest is to research and study and let you know what that signal is composed of, right? Because that signal is the one that makes iPad, mobile, all these devices tick. That signal is what makes them go, right? That signal is made up of something called non-ionizing electromagnetic radiations. It has got several names. The other name is microwave, by the way, and that microwave is the same as you use in your microwave oven. You know, when you heat up food in your microwave oven, on one end, when you switch on the electricity, there is a device called magnetron. Magnetron produces some waves which go through your food and the food heats up. Right? Those waves are microwaves, and those waves are similar to the same waves which bring the signal to us, to your iPads, to your mobile phones, to your computers, to your laptops and devices. Okay? How can that possibly affect our body? I told you in the beginning, unfortunately I happen to be a doctor, so I must touch upon that aspect. How does that signal, which is composed of these waves, affect your body? Right? I hope you got a sense of what's coming, what we're going to talk about, right? Firstly, would you have some question in your mind about this thing? Is there anything that you like to ask about cell phone, signal, laptop, iPad, anything? Anybody have a question? I'd love to hear.
Make it interactive so that you also learn and you also learn.
Anything, and don't hesitate. Whatever shoots off your mind, you're free. I'm not your principal.
Even the most stupidest of questions, just ask.
Serious, please.
How are the waves formed?
How are the waves formed? Great.
Great.
Okay. I'm waiting to hear from others. Yeah. If everybody can say something about this, that will make our task much easier. Go ahead.
How can the waves affect our body?
Great. And that should include the body of human beings, body of animals, and plants.
But radios use a different wave, right? They use radio waves.
Come again?
Radio.
Radio waves. Okay.
Like medium wave, FM.
I know. Radio waves. Are they different from microwaves? That's your question. So radio waves versus microwaves. Okay? Go ahead.
What precautions can we take?
Absolutely. That's actually the most vital question. Precautions.
What is the maximum distance these waves can travel? The maximum distance these waves can travel.
Maximum distance these waves can travel. Okay. Yeah. Yep, go ahead.
So
Does it affect the body suddenly or after like a period of time?
Great. You should have brilliant bunch here.
Really excellent.
Really. In fact, sudden or gradual. Okay. Go ahead.
So microwave is like kind of light, type of light, right?
It's a kind of light, okay?
So
Not exactly, but I'll clarify, yeah.
so why can't we see the microwaves coming out of the phone and we can see the microwaves
Why
coming out of the
microwaves are not visible, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very nice.
How can these microwaves travel so fast?
How can they travel so fast? Well, these are some of the questions that I didn't think of myself. Yeah.
Do you have any medium to travel?
Yes.
So what are some severe types of consequences?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you better.
Some severe types of consequences.
Health effects. Health effects.
So like what controls these waves? What controls these waves? Like
What controls these waves? Industry.
like
Power.
Vodafone.
Power. That's what he meant.
What controls these waves?
Means what would happen if something is not there? Is that what you mean? Okay. That's
Okay, power. Yep. Right, sir.
anything interfere between the traveling of these waves? Can anything interfere
Okay,
between the
anything
traveling?
interfere, okay. Okay.
Are all waves harmful or some are okay?
Excellent, yeah. Sorry, can
Are
you
there any
tell?
government regulations to exposure of these waves?
Amazing.
I think you're a wonderful bunch
Wonderful.
of very intelligent children. I've gone to about 30-40 schools, but this is the best batch. I knew that.
Do they affect the body within, like inside or
Your colleague asked this question. So we already have it here.
Health effects.
are there any specific conditions for the waves to travel fastest or like it's like for example like if it's like different countries have different conditions like climate etc. So does that affect the movement of these like waves?
Whether climate affects
Yeah.
movement. Okay.
So what quantity of waves can we take? Like how much can we take?
How much would be acceptable without causing harm? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, kind of what would be the safe limit?
Yeah.
That's an excellent question, by the way. Safety limit?
By
Good.
what means do they carry the information?
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. How they carry information. Yeah. Anything else we have?
Can it affect our environment?
Okay.
Do they have differently or different types of people? I suppose, do they have differently on somebody who's heavy and somebody who's not? factors affecting their speed.
Factors affecting speed. So we're done?
Yeah.
Another one? Okay. It's becoming faint. Okay, just allow me a minute and then.
You want another color to ticket?
Yeah, we will talk about power. So we will talk about the strength of it. Okay. Yes?
So which body parts these types of waves will affect the most?
Oh, yeah. Very good. Very good. Okay? Yeah, go ahead, sir. How to measure that?
Does the skin complexion matter? Like, does skin color matter for the wave? Like if the skin is
Will it affect
darker, will it
people
affect
more
more or
than-
less?
Yeah. Sorry. What was your question? How can you measure?
Because now you start and then
Yes.
again we will have questions.
Okay, okay. They're wonderful, just so wonderful. Okay. I think somebody asked me, how were they produced in the first place, right? How were these waves produced in the first place, and what are they composed of, how do they travel? That was your question, am I right? Okay. The first thing that you need to realize is this, that there are two separate issues here. Firstly, radiation, which is the other name for waves, yeah. So this radiation, I'll probably continue to call it radiation, but by that I mean the same thing as waves, okay? So radiation exists in nature, right? And radiation can also be man-made. That's the first thing that you need to know. And the radiation that exists in nature has existed ever since beginning of the planet. Ever since beginning of the planet. Before we came around on this earth. You know, we, the humans, came around on this earth about 200,000 years ago. The planet has been around for 4.57 billion years ago. Sorry, the earth has been 4.57 billion years ago. The universe has been there for 13.73 billion years ago. So the changes that were happening in the beginning, billions of years ago, initially the planets were very hot and then they cooled down. When they cooled down, there was some radiation released. That radiation is called background radiation. Okay? So that background radiation has always been there, even before any of us was around, even before 200,000 years ago. So that radiation, which is already in the background, is an extremely low intensity radiation. It's there even now. And it is extremely low intensity radiation, so it has absolutely no impact, adverse impact on us. It has an impact, but no adverse impact on us. Okay? In fact, we grew up in the middle of that radiation. You probably know that there are other fundamental forces in nature, you know, like gravity, right? Gravity has always been around. Electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear forces. These are called fundamental forces in nature, and we have all grown up in the middle of these forces. These forces have actually aided our evolution. This is one. The second aspect is that these waves can also be man-made. So our concern is not at all with natural radiation, because natural radiation is fine, except with some exceptions. Like radon can cause harm to the body, which comes from under the ground sometimes when you're digging the ground, or uranium can cause harm to the body because they cause ionizing radiation. But other than that, you have a question?
Do radiation get destroyed when they collide with black matter?
That's actually a very good question, but not essentially a part of what we are discussing. You're probably drifting into quantum physics and astronomy and astrology. Yes, when they collide, they get sucked into a black hole, and that's up there, and they never return to the planet. But that's probably on another day, if you like. But for now, the man-made radiation, the waves, how they're produced, these electromagnetic waves, also known as microwaves, also known as non-ionizing radio frequency radiations. They are different names, same thing. They are the ones which bring the signal for your cell phones, for your iPads, for your computers and laptops. Those are man-made, and basically it is based on the photoelectric effect that was described by Albert Einstein in 1905, that if you strike a metal with an electromagnetic force, it generates electricity, it generates current. And once this electromagnetic wave has been created, the antenna, which is what is on your cell tower, can allow this wave to travel through space. Somebody said that do they travel only in one direction or all directions? They travel 360 degrees in all directions. Okay? And these waves, like any other waves, are like this. This is the point where they start. This is the maximum amplitude. They come back here. This completes one cycle. Beginning here, going up, going down, and coming back to the neutral point completes one cycle. So, and the waves have two characteristics, by the way, the frequency and the intensity, as you know. The frequency indicates how many cycles are there per second. So, a wave could possibly be like this, or it could 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 be, too tightly packed together. Now, this is a low frequency, and this is a high frequency. Because in 1 second there will be far too many of these, they are called crests and troughs, and there will be far too many of crests and troughs here, so it's a high frequency. When you speak about these X-rays and gamma rays, X-rays that you do in the hospitals, those use very, very high frequency radiations, and those are ionizing. But we are concerned with non-ionizing. Can anything interfere? Yes. The metallic objects can interfere, but otherwise they can travel through the concrete walls. I'm coming back to the harm a little bit later. What was your question? How do they carry information? I think that's amazing. These waves are basically a carrier wave, right? Which is harmless for the body, by the way. If it's a carrier wave, that is the original wave generated from the source. That's a harmless wave. Now that wave can be pulsed and modulated. When you make the wave pulsed and modulated, what you're doing basically is you are mounting information over the carrier wave. So there is a carrier wave and there is a signal wave. The carrier wave does not carry any information. What do we mean by information? When you're calling, your voice which is traveling on the wave is information. If you're texting, your text is the information. If you're sending a video, that video is an information. So information could be audio, could be video, or could be text. All of these are information, and they are mounted on top of carrier wave. It's just like you put clothes on a clothesline. So clothesline is the carrier wave. Along with the clothes on top, it becomes a modulated wave. You have probably heard of FM radio, AM radio. What is FM for? What does FM stand for?
Frequency modulation.
What does
Frequency modulation.
Yeah, see, your friend is telling us. Frequency modulation. So what are you doing there? You are basically modulating the carrier wave. You are modulating the frequency of the carrier wave, so it is called frequency modulation, FM. The older version used to be AM, which is amplitude modulation. So, sure, I think you want to say something?
So how do the electronic devices collect the radiations?
How do they collect these waves? Yeah, you see, there's a transmitter and there's a receiver, right? And those two have to be tuned to each other. By tuned, I mean that when you transmit, so these waves are going to come at a certain frequency, which means certain number of cycles per second. So, suppose you use your cell phone, it comes at the frequency of 2.4 megahertz. That's about 2.4 billion waves per second. So your cell phone has got to be having a receiver which is tuned to 2.4 billion waves per second, so it can receive. So there's a transmitter on one end and there's a receiver on the other end. The job of the antenna is to transmit. The job of the cell phone is to receive.
So can waves expire? Like, do they have like a deadline? Only at this extent?
They weaken in power. The power becomes weak as they go the distance. Okay, so we are done with this, and we'll come to that. How do they carry information? Are there different types of waves? I think that came from you. Are there different types of waves? Yes, there are different types of waves, and that basically is determined by the frequency with which they travel. By the way, has anybody seen an electromagnetic wave? Anybody? Sure? Well, you're seeing one right now. Can you tell me where it is? Light. Yes. Light is essentially an electromagnetic wave. So that's what you really need to realize to come close to the topic. Light is essentially an electromagnetic wave, and it is actually a segment of that spectrum. It is called visible light. You have heard of ultraviolet light? You have heard of infrared light, right? So when you say light, we mean the visible portion of this spectrum of waves. There's a spectrum. So when you go higher up in the frequency, it becomes ultraviolet. We can't see it, birds can see it. Some birds can see it. When you go below the visible light, in terms of frequency, in terms of cycles per second, so the frequency is less, that becomes infrared light, infrared electromagnetic wave. Have you ever felt a wave? Not seen, but felt? When you feel heat close to your face, that's an infrared electromagnetic wave. Heat, in other words, is an infrared electromagnetic wave. So, waves can be seen, waves can be felt. Do you know that your body produces electricity? You know that? That your body produces electricity. Anybody agrees with me?
Yes.
It does? It doesn't.
It does. It is covered with the
Please, let it tell us.
So where it is produced and where it is passed, there is a fat layer around it, so it insulates the
Can you tell something more simple to convince your friends?
Like there's a fat layer which doesn't allow the electricity to go out of that part of the tube.
Do you agree with it?
Yes.
Okay. You probably know that in hospital, guys like us, we do electrocardiograms, ECG. Have you heard of ECG? What is ECG?
So ECG is a heart rate sensor.
It's an electrode around here, and then a graph comes. That graph is the electrical output of heart. Similarly, there is something called EEG, electroencephalogram, which is the electrical output of your brain, which the neurologist study. But the cardiologist or heart doctor, when he sees you, he does an ECG. ECG, the graphic representation is a representation of the electrical output of your heart. So if your heart has an electrical output that we can measure, that's a proof that body produces electricity. Alright? So body does produce electricity, not the kind of electricity that you will feel if you put your finger in the socket. Not that kind of electricity. That's far too powerful. That's 120 volts. What I'm talking about is minus 80 millivolts. So it's a minuscule electricity, but it is electricity just the same. Do you agree with me? So body does produce electricity, body does produce magnetism, and body does produce electromagnetic waves, and these waves can actually be measured. Now, the point is this: if your body produces electromagnetism, body produces electricity, if you hold something like a cell phone close to you, the radiation outside the body from the cell phone and radiation inside the body, coming out of the body, they interact, and there is no way that there is not going to be any effect, because the two are electrical objects. If you hold your cell phone while making a call next to your television, you can hear, right? You can hear the disturbance. What is that disturbance? There are two devices operating at different frequencies, and if they are too close together, their fields merge, they interact, and they don't agree with each other, and they produce a disturbance that we can hear like a audio, which is very, very jarring for the ears. I'm sure you've heard of, all of you have heard, that if you bring something close to a television, there's a sound which you don't like. The sound that you don't like is the electrical interference. So there is similarly an electrical interference between two bodies. This is one, the other is cell phone. So these two brought close together when this is an active call mode, not in airplane mode, not in flight mode. So there is going to be an interaction. The trouble with this is that with the television set, the interference is gross. It is so gross that it is audible to us, so we believe it. Whereas the interference in this case, is very subtle, is extremely under the surface, so it's not easily noticed because it's extremely subtle. It's very, very low intensity because the electricity produced by the body itself is extremely low intensity. See? So that interference being so small, most people don't believe it because they can't see it. Now, the thing is that if you're using scientific tools, tools to measure, those scientific tools have been developed to such an amazing extent that we can measure even minor interruptions that take place within your cells. And that's from where we got the evidence that when you use these devices, there is actual interference at the level of your cells. And if those interferences continue, then at some point of time, you see there is something called cumulative damage, collective damage after a certain length of time. That damage does not surface if you were playing on iPad for half an hour, 1 hour, or even 2 hours. But if you're somebody who's doing it an hour a day for days together, for weeks together, and for months together, then it does happen. Have you ever heard of something called digital dementia? Dementia. You know what is dementia? Dementia is a condition in medical science which indicates a cognitive decline. Cognitive? Okay, there's a decline in your mental abilities. Now, the kids like you in South Korea, that's where this story came from. Because in South Korea, the density of these devices and their usage by the kids is way above anywhere else in the world. The kids in South Korea use these devices for more number of hours than anywhere else in the world. And therefore, that's the right place to learn how this might be affecting. And they have found, and there is evidence, medical evidence of the fact that those children, you guys are hungry, I'm so sorry. So those children are developing, decline in their mental abilities because of extreme exposure to these devices. That's called digital dementia. That's because of the interaction. Okay. So effect on body, we are virtually done with that. Somebody said radio waves. Radio waves, microwaves, basically the difference is the frequency. Radio waves have little lower. Radio waves are the ones which are used for FM and AM radio, by the way, and also for television. So we are done with that. Why microwaves are not visible? If somebody asked me the question. There is only a portion of the spectrum from the lower end to the high end, which is visible to the human eye. It is not visible because the way our eyes are designed, the way the human eyes are designed, they are designed to detect a certain range of frequencies of electromagnetic spectrum. They are not designed by nature to detect the entire spectrum. If you were able to see the entire spectrum, probably we would go crazy. So it is good that we can't see the entire spectrum. We can only see the one which is relevant for human life. So that's why they are not visible. How can they travel so fast? Well, they travel fast. In fact, they travel at the speed of light. Yeah, which is why if you make call to your friend in Australia or New York at this moment, it is not long before he can pick up on the other side, because they travel at the speed of light. So now we are left with, I think, the last part of my talk, which is to do with health effects. This we have done. Which, I think is a brilliant question, which parts of the body are more vulnerable than the others? That was yourself, I guess. Yeah, we are done with formation of waves, precautions, impact. Are all waves harmful? Potentially, yes. All waves are harmful, but the degree of harm that you can expect is different. The ones which are most harmful are the X-rays and the gamma rays. They're at the top end of the spectrum. That means they have the highest frequency. But the ones which are low frequency, they are also harmful, but to a lesser extent. Yeah. So somebody asked me a question about safety limit. Yeah. That was a smart question actually. Safety limit. You see, when you take medication, for example, if you take an antibiotic, the doctor will tell you it's 250 milligrams 3 times a day or something, right? How do they know it's 250 milligrams and not 200 or 500 or 10,000? Because the trials have been conducted prior to their marketing that if you give this dose, then you get that effect. And that's the effect which is desirable, right? If you've got a vomiting, for example, and there's a drug which stops vomiting, you can't go on taking the drug to any extent. You need a minimum dose which will stop your vomiting, which will also not cause any harm. So there's got to be a minimum safe dose, right? So all drugs, before they are marketed, they have a minimum safe dose. If you take overdose yourself, then you have side effects. Like drug addicts do sometimes overdose themselves and then they have side effects. In case of radiation, in case of cell phones, there are organizations in the US and also in Europe, two main organizations. The one in the US is called FCC, Federal Communications Commission, and the one in Europe is called the International Commission of Non-Ionizing Protection for Radiation. These two organizations actually were involved about 25 years ago in setting up safety limits, and they did set up safety limits. The safety limits that they set up at that time, at a time when we did not have 3G and 4G smartphones. We had 1G and 2G, the older version of phones. I'm sure none of you have seen that. So 1G and 2G were a different breed of phones altogether. These safety limits which were set might have been fine for those phones, but they're probably not fine. Phones have changed tremendously since the time the safety limits were set. So we are still marketing new cell phones with safety limits which were set 25 years ago. They now have been found not to be relevant. However, governments have not changed it yet. This is a bit of a paradox. This is a bit of something that you can't swallow easily. This is something that a lot of people are agitating against. A lot of NGOs are agitating against. There is a lot of pressure in the governments. There is a lot of court cases going on against that particular point. But that's something, still in doldrums. We haven't yet been successful in persuading either the industry or the governments to change the safety limits. So your cell phones even today are designed with a safety limit which is more than 2 decades old, which is a pity. That's unfortunate, but that's a fact. So this is about the government regulations and safety limits. Can they affect climate? Can they affect environment? Yes, they can. Because like I said right in the beginning, the environment, which includes the animals, the plants, us, all kinds of living matter, is influenced by a background level of radiation anyway. But that background radiation of level is so low that it has absolutely no ill health effects. Now, the current level of radiation in the environment, because of man-made radiation, right, which is kind of a new layer that we have added on top of a pre-existing layer of background radiation. It's a new layer that we have added. And each time a next batch of cell towers is erected, we add little more of that radiation to the environment. So that invisible radiation is all around us, at all times, coming from multiple sources, many times overlapping each other, and randomly affecting us even if we are not carrying a cell phone. You see, that's the point. Even if you are not carrying a cell phone. So everybody is affected. And so is the dog in the street, so is the cat, so is your pets, so are the plants, so is rainwater. So yes, there is an impact on environment, and with the new cell phones which are coming, which is 5G generation, the 5th generation, the expected impact on environment is much worse. So finally, can the impact be sudden or can it be gradual? Well, most of the time gradual, but it can also have a sudden impact. A sudden impact can emerge. I don't know if you have noticed this, that if your call on a cell phone has gone a bit longer than 10 to 15 minutes. Oh yeah, lovely. You see, that's the point. And thank you. She made the point that I am trying to make. That your ear heats up. Don't please ignore that fact. Why your ear heats up? The fact that your ear heats up is an evidence that your body is absorbing it. Otherwise, why would the ear heat up? So, it's an evidence that your body is absorbing the radiation, so that's why your ear heats up. Okay, you don't mind it, you put it down, and after a while your ear cools down, and that's the end of the story. But imagine it happening to you over and over and over and over again. I don't want to scare you with the facts, but the facts are that if it continues for a very long time, then it has even worse effects. Even worse effects. You know, kids older than you, in their probably 20s, who are working in call centers, you know that, or working in customer care centers with headphones and cell phones all the time. I have seen many of them reporting to us in hospitals after 6 months of their job with that kind of symptom, headache, burning, heat, which is constant. So those are more or less immediate effects, sudden effects, but there are long-term effects. And the worst effect, of course, is that even possibility of cancer has been related with cell phones, but that's in the long term, that's not in the short term. That's if somebody has used it for 10 years or longer, and also on the same side of the ear. Yes, it can happen. Yes, it can happen.
Because can you tell them also that World Health Organization thing?
Oh yeah, this is something amazing that you need to know, that the World Health Organization, which is the body that we look up to for information on health, we wanted to know what is their position on it. And their position on it was actually, as per 2011, they came out with a paper in which they said that cell phone and iPhone and iPad and all these radiation can possibly cause cancer. It is their position on it. It can possibly cause cancer. Now, there are several groups of scientists, doctors all over the world who do not agree with that paper. And they have given more evidence to World Health Organization to go through, and they have asked them to revise their position and bring it up to the level that it can cause cancer. You know? And By the way, they have classifications like 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. For this, when they say possibly it can cause cancer, this is called class 2B. Class 2B means it can possibly cause cancer. You know what else is in class 2B? Pesticides. Diesel. The smoke from the vehicles. This is DDT. DDT. Now, would you like to give DDT to your kids? That's the question. Would you like ask them to drink diesel or expose them to pesticides? Because these three are as harmful. The cell phone is as harmful as these three. Pesticides, diesel, what else is there? Pesticides, diesel, DDT. DDT. Yes, DDT. DDT. So it's like having DDT next to you. Which parts of the body get affected? Excellent point. The parts of the body which do get affected most. Brain. Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Now, you see, the parts which get affected most also depends on the position of the cell phone or iPad or computer relative to your body. Because it is right here, right? It is right here. So the closest sensitive organs are brain, eye, and there's a salivary gland here. It's called parotid gland, which produces saliva in the mouth. The gland is right here. So cancer of this, and this have all been documented. They are on record, on medical records. So these are three areas here. Now, if you keep it in the trouser's pocket, in case of boys, the testis gets affected. In case of boys, from this, testis can get affected, and that can affect your fertility. Growing boys, fertility. If the girls are keeping it at the back pocket, here the ovaries are not too far. So there is a question of female infertility because of that. So these are real concerns, you see. That's about health effects, which parts get affected. So in fact, finally, precautions. And I think this is the one, if you were sleeping through most of my lecture, it's time to wake up. Can I have the last slide from somewhere? Somebody, lights off? We are done almost. But this actually, I left it in the end because this is probably the most important part of the subject. And please pay attention to that. Firstly, don't carry it on your body as much as possible. You can carry it in your bag. You can carry it in a pouch which is not close to the body. But keeping it in a holster, as is the fashion sometimes, or in your pockets, is really terrible. And texting is far safer than talking. Text is safer than talking because you're holding it away from the body. You should use the speaker mode as much as possible. As much as possible, use a speaker mode or an air tube. Don't use your cell phone if it's running on low battery or if the signal is very poor. Because under these two circumstances, poor signal, low bat, the cell phone, it increases its power. Even while it is charging. True. So you should not use, when it's a low signal or while it is charging, because it loses more power. Don't use it in closed spaces, like if you're in a metro where all doors are closed, the radiation bounces back and forth from everywhere, and in the metro usually there are close to 100 people using cell phone at the same time. If you are carrying it in your pocket and you have something like keys or chains or coins or the metal buckle of your belt, all these metallic devices, even the glass frame if it is metallic and your cell phone is here, the metallic devices, metallic stuff, that increases the intensity of the radiation. While you're sleeping, keep it as far away as possible. Don't use it when you're driving. And by the way, we are not at all against internet. Internet is wonderful. While I was talking all this while, we never meant for a second that do not use iPads. We never meant for a second that do not use your computers, your laptops. Please use them. Internet has changed our lives tremendously, and if it is used sensibly, it's an excellent tool at our disposal. What we are specifically against is that how do you take the signal for your internet? Do you take a wired signal or a wireless signal? You get the point? When you're using Wi-Fi, you're using a wireless signal. That's the one which is troublesome. But in older days, we had a slightly different system where there was no Wi-Fi router in the house, but through the telephone cable or through the cable, we used to bring it cable physically and connect it to the computer, and then you get internet. That system is called a wired system. A wired system works just as efficiently as your wireless system. So all that I am trying to say is that in the classrooms, at home, anywhere, as long as you convert a wireless signal to a wired signal, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine to use internet.
So the trouble is them on the same thing on Scandinavia, where the teachers know about it, that they went off on Wi-Fi and now they are going.
Yes, actually, this business of using these devices in the classrooms, when we were kids, we used to carry school bags, but now they carry iPads. So when, it all started in Stockholm, in Sweden, and that was in the beginning of this century. They all started promoting wireless Wi-Fi and iPad and laptops in the classrooms. Would you know that today they're winding it up? They're stopping it because they are the ones who have realized the flip side of the story. So what they're doing is they have not stopped internet in classrooms. That's not the point. They have continued to use internet in the classroom, but the signal transmission to your devices is not wireless. It is wired. So if you bring a wired cable and then split it into multiple outflows and feed every iPad, feed every computer, it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly acceptable. But the moment you use a Wi-Fi signal, a wireless signal, our kids are getting exposed. That's the trouble. They are also using lead paints inside the walls. They have removed the cell towers, and this is by a government decree. And the same is true in France. It started with Sweden, then Swedish authorities stopped it. They made a wired internet, and then it happened in France, and then probably in Bulgaria, some other countries. I'm not fully updated on that. Okay, if you must give it to a small baby, small child, which is not uncommon nowadays, 2-year-olds, you can put it on airplane mode. However, about 2 weeks ago, I had a mother in my office for a medical consultation, and the kid was crying, 2-year-old, and she gave it to him. The kid became very quiet. He started playing with the cell phone, and I told the mother that if you must give it to him, you put it on flight mode. That's much safer, so he can continue playing with it. So we put it on a flight mode, gave it back to the kid, and then he looks at the mother. He says, "Where is the internet?" A 2-year-old. Would you believe that? So they can figure out whether or not it is there. So if you're a pregnant woman, if you're a pregnant person, you should never put it on your abdomen, because its effect on a growing fetus is terrible. While you're sleeping, keep your cell phones away, turn off your Wi-Fi router if possible, and persuade your neighbors to turn it off as well. Schools, I have already said that we should not use them. This is a book that I wrote on this subject, and it came out last year, and it is called Global Wireless Spider Web. If you remember the name, you can Google it on Amazon, you can read it, you can tell your parents, and I'm sure you'll find something useful in there. Thank you very much.